Well, as we do at my church, 45 minutes north of here, we start every gathering with a little breathing because somehow we all forget. So, to help calm my nerves more than y'all, would you join me in a deep breath in and out? I used to get panic attacks when I would preach. They were awful. I would be up there talking about love and grace and joy and peace. And inside, the voice was screaming at me to get out of the room. I would literally be in fight or flight mode, which you know what that feels like. But somewhere along the line, I had decided under no circumstances could anyone ever know how bad it was. I just wanted to be good at what I did, so no one could ever know, which worked really great for everyone else until one Sunday I hit the wall. Happened in worship, in my traditional service. Right. I stopped my sermon, I told them what was happening, and I hung up my head, I closed my eyes, tears, the whole thing. I didn't know what to do next, hadn't happened before. There was no class in seminary for that moment. And then I felt hands on my arms and my shoulders and my head. And 5 or 6 people from my church had gotten up and prayed for me. They finished, they sat down, and I looked up with a pretty weak smile. And I said, I don't know if I can finish my sermon. And my 82-year-old friend in the second row piped up, I think we had our sermon for today. I was like, okay. That was a really significant moment for a tightly wound, I'll give you one guess, Enneagram 1. Enneagram 1 or 3, it was one of those. 1. Recovering perfectionist, apparently for the rest of my life. Thought you could get over that, you can't. And I have higher expectations for myself than anyone will ever touch. And so that day I learned something. I learned that my people just wanted me. Not all the things I could produce as their pastor. They just wanted my heart and me. And that continues to be the most vulnerable, the most terrifying, and the best thing that has ever happened to me in my life as a leader. Problem is, I didn't get a class in seminary where they told me it was okay to be myself with my people. I learned professional distance. I learned ethics and responsibility and power and boundaries, and which are so good. And somewhere along the line in circles, in church, in school, in our denomination, I also picked up a lot of unspoken stories about competition and comparison and cynicism and isolation. And it took about a decade, but I finally realized if I wanted to heal this competition and comparison wound in me, that then it was also, as God's healing does, when we offer God something in here that needs healed, it's so often also once healed out here. And so one reason I care a lot about our leadership culture as people, as the body of Christ, as my own church, the reason I care is because 20 years ago, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. I was 17. So chronic pain, fatigued muscles, they continue today to teach me the dance between my limits and my expansion. And so for 2 decades, I cannot believe it's already been 2 decades, I have had to dig so deep to learn how to be well enough to keep saying yes to God's invitations. And so I really don't need, on top of this culture of competition and this shadow leadership vibe that we somehow breathe in our culture, I don't need all of that on top of everything else that was already tripping me up in ministry. So I decided to do something about it. Took me a decade or two, but I finally decided to do something about it. And last summer, it's not rocket science, I started a leadership cohort. And I invited 6 or 7 of my colleagues, people I wanted to get to know, wanted to spend more time with. And we started meeting. And again, not hard. Once a month on Zoom, we talk, we check in. Lots of you do those things. The one thing new we did that I've never done that's been a game changer is we use the Marco Polo app as a group to leave each other messages. So we bonded so much faster since we're across the miles. We leave each other text messages on Sunday mornings with funny memes, and we share our train wreck worship moments together. And my favorite part was we all rearranged our schedules for 24 hours right before our orders gathering this past fall. And we rented an Airbnb and we retreated together. And it was some of the most life-changing ministry I've been a part of in a year or two. To sit around a fire or the kitchen counter with people who used to be my competition was water for a parched soul. And it turns out that Saint Brené Brown is right. It's hard to hate people close up. And not that I hated any of those people, especially the ones of you that are in the room from my group. Didn't hate any of you. But I sure had picked up somewhere along the line that just like my job was to never let my church see me panic, that my colleagues would never see me let my guard down. There's too much at stake. But I let my guard down. And it turns out we're all a little scared. We're all a little unsure. It feels like everyone else got a playbook and our copy never showed up. Because that's how I feel. Y'all always look so confident. My playbook didn't arrive. I don't know what I'm doing. We're leading in a time when all bets are off. Nothing that worked, if it ever worked in the first place, works anymore. And I think a lot of us are dying a little bit inside of overwhelm, overwork, lack of real connection, all while like nodding and waving at each other. I'm fine. Things are good. Things are great. And I call BS. And I've stumbled into something that in the midst of all of this is saving me. And maybe it might serve you too. So about 10 years ago, I met someone that a lot of you know, Dr. Elaine Heath, and she flew up to Alaska. I was 5 months post-seminary graduation, and she gave a keynote. And if you know Elaine, you knew that I needed her at just that moment. I was full of intellect and academic structure, and now I'm thrown into the local church in my late 20s. I needed heart. I needed structure. And she taught this contemplative stance that captured me at a moment I needed it so much. And I'll tell you about that in a moment. And then a few years later, I read Bob Goff's book, Love Does. And he tells this great story. He's a lawyer, among many other things. And he tells this story in depositions with his clients. He said, hey, when you sit down to that table, I want you to sit down, open your hands, palms up, put them on your knees, because it is impossible to feel defensive when your hands are open. And he said, if I see you close up your hands in fear or anger or tension, I will kick you under the table. Open your hands. Well, apparently, as Shalom just showed us, the position of our bodies reflect the position of our hearts. Palms up, huh? Hey, a decent preacher knows a good phrase when they see one. So I started preaching that, and it stuck. And then somewhere along the line, I combined the two. This contemplative stance I'll tell you about in a moment with palms up, and it took on a life of its own. It is now the lifeblood of how I live, how I love, and how I lead. It is the way of Jesus, and it is saving me. So here's how it works. 4 steps to this thing. We show up. We pay attention, we cooperate with God, and we release the outcome. So the first one, we show up. We show up to ourselves, to everything we try to ignore. We show up to people. We show up with our mess. We don't apologize, and we don't always hide it. We show up. And then we pay attention to the person in front of us, to the headlines we would rather ignore. We become expert noticers. And then we cooperate with God. This one's my favorite. We don't bring God to people. God's already there. God's already at work, which means we just join in. We cooperate, which means the pressure is off because God is doing the thing, not us. And the 4th one is the hardest, I think, but it might change you the most. Release the outcome. We let go of control, of people, of plans. We let go of needing to know every single thing that will happen. We are okay with steps 1 and 2. We know that steps 3 through 100 will come when they come. We release the outcome. Palms up. So this way of living, called Palms Up Life, because everything needs a brand apparently, is saving me in 3 specific ways. First one. Palms Up is changing my relationship with my colleagues. About a year ago, I worked with our district superintendent to put together a district retreat, and we called it Stories of the Pastorhood. And we spent the day talking about competition and comparison and cynicism and isolation. And I went first and shared some of my stories, and then we spent the day talking about our relationships to each other. Where did we want to be closer and more authentic and vulnerable, and where were we doing okay? And then at the end of the day, we had a holy ground moment. Everyone was invited, if they wanted, to take a turn with the microphone and share the answer to this statement. If you really knew me, you would know. And as voices cracked, tears fell, and laughter filled the room, my competition became human. We're learning to see spirit in each other and trust it. And now when I see my colleagues, the first thing I see is their humanity and their courage and their local church struggles that all too often are the exact same things I'm going through. So through this palms up way of being, some of my colleagues and I are learning to trust spirit and give God so much more room to work. So we show up, we pay attention, we cooperate with God, and we release the outcome. A second way that it's saving me lately is in my local church. When I first got there 4 or 5 years ago, I didn't know what to preach in those first few months, so I preached what I knew, palms up. And it has become our discipleship pathway. It's how we follow Jesus together. And our people, of course, they memorize the 4 steps. It's not too hard. But much more importantly, we're seeing it in their daily life. We watch it in real live time. And it has been so fun to watch them live this out. So much of disciple making feels like throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks this year, because it didn't stick last year and it might not stick next decade. Maybe it will now. But this way of living and leading and loving, I have never seen discipleship growth like this. My crew is learning to see Spirit, to trust it, and to follow it. They want to birth 10 new expressions of faith in the next 30 years, now 29 years. And I credit the ability for that dream to even start to emerge to Palms Up. The only way they were even ready to see that as a potential was because they had been practicing letting go so much. So because my church is practicing this, they get more room for God to work. So we show up, we pay attention, we cooperate with God, and we release the outcome. One final way that this is saving me is as a human being. Almost 3 years ago, I made a really intentional choice to finally own up to how bad. The anxiety, the panic, all of it. And I finally saw that I had to give up the idea that I could hide all of these things forever, because I just wanted to be a good pastor. I just wanted to be a good wife, a good mom, a good leader. And I did. I had to own the fact that I wasn't ever going to get there while pretending that I had it all together. And this Palms Up way of living, it gave me two things. It gave me courage, but almost more importantly, it gave me structure. It gave me guidance. It gave me wisdom, because every time I would go a little bit deeper, and a little bit deeper, I was always so scared of what I was going to find in there. That's why I stayed up here for 3 decades. But you know what I found? Eventually. So much love. So much of the divine freedom. Hours of sitting on the couch with a therapist, spiritual director, coach, family, friends, continues today to teach me who I really am and the me that I have hidden under so many expectations and assumptions and pain. So we show up, we pay attention, we cooperate with God, and we release the outcome. So my beloved friends, brothers and sisters in the work together, may we be people who move through life with open palms. May we be people who release control over people and plans. May we be people who let go of fear and manipulation. May we dance in the truth that the pressure is off. The rule book has been thrown out and we're not in charge anymore, because we have given our lives to the one who will take us where we need to go. And it turns out it's where we wanted to go the whole time. Amen.